Let it be said, if Google were to create a driving simulator version of their Street View application, that it would sell literally by the millions. It is no small exaggeration to say that what the majority of racing gamers truly look for in the games they play is the sensation of traveling through real-world locales using cars they could never hope to afford in the real world. Bonus points if those very locations are locations that those same people have traveled to in real life. For example, Madeline traveled to Las Vegas in the summer of 2022, and she had the privilege of taking a rental car out around the 215 Beltway, as well as taking the newly constructed Interstate 11 out to Hoover Dam. When she returned home the following week and booted up the Crew 2, imagine her amusement when that week's live summit was hosted in, you guessed it, Las Vegas. That particular summit is also a bit special for her, as it was the week she grinded out the Bugatti La Voiture Noire, and it was also her first time taking platinum in a live summit. But the true joy of that week was really connecting the landmarks in-game to all of the landmarks she had just visited in real life. All of the hotels on the Strip, such as the Excalibur Hotel, which she stayed at, the nearby Luxor Hotel, then the McCarran International Airport, also known as Harry Reid International, but does anyone really call it that? As well as, of course, Hoover Dam. And while the Crew 2 gets a lot of these locations right, the unfortunate irony is, it gets the road networks, you know, the meat of the game, completely wrong. This has been a point of contention really since the Crew 1, which, let's be fair, was even worse. If you have ever stopped to examine the Crew as a series, you will notice something a bit strange. Many of the highways and freeways on the east side of the United States have proper highway signage, numbering, and mileage markers for control cities. Once you go west of the Great Plains, however, highway shields are nowhere to be found, or they say US Route 0. Mileage signs are still present, though there are a lot fewer of them. Additionally, you will notice that a lot of the highways on both sides of the country really are simply not to code at all. There are interchanges which lead to nowhere, highways which double back on themselves in strange ways, and many roads that simply aren't striped at all. If the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration were to do a review of any of the Crew games, they would all receive a failing grade. Yes, that even goes for the Crew Motorfest. Despite Madeline's high praises of the Maui expansion, it is far from perfect. The real question is, can games get as close to the ideal of real-world simulation in terms of free roam simulator, ignoring all other factors? I would say at the time of making this video, there is only one game which has ever come close. That would be Midnight Club Los Angeles for the Xbox 360 and PlayStation 3. Rockstar Games had a lot of experience to draw from as the creators of Grand Theft Auto San Andreas. It isn't too difficult to take a parody of real-world Los Angeles and simply remove the parody part of it. The base game focuses primarily on West Side LA, so everything west of Interstate 5. The major freeways of the game include Interstates 5, 10, and 405, US Highway 101, and California State Route 110. While State Route 1 is in the game, it is only a small section at the Santa Monica Pier. That being said, major city streets are all labeled accordingly. This includes Mulholland Drive, Grand Avenue, Wilshire Boulevard, and so on. There is so much attention to detail here that when you are being chased by the police, they will verbally say what street or freeway you are on in real time. And there are only two problems with all this. The first being that the South Central expansion did away with some of the attention to detail. Signage is just plain text because Rockstar couldn't be bothered. The second problem, and perhaps more damning, is you cannot properly record this game due to DMCA. Rockstar, in their infinite wisdom, made it so that if you are using Xbox DVR to record the game, the audio will be muted. Thus, it is impossible to use this game as a free-roam driving simulator, much less playing through the actual career, unless you use direct game capture to bypass the DRM. So unless somebody wants to shell out the cash to upgrade Madeline's recording setup, this game is unfortunately shelved for the foreseeable future. Enough about Rockstar, let's instead look at Electronic Arts. Although Need for Speed Underground 2 was the first modern NFS title to feature interstates, most of the signage was more fictionalized to show city boroughs, identified with unique shapes. We will never understand the reasoning for this, but it doesn't really matter anyway. NFS Most Wanted 2005 was actually the first game to do highway code correctly. Signage was a lot more accurate, denoting the US highways 99 and 201, and exit signs again had district names on them as control points. A similar approach was then used for Need for Speed Carbon and Undercover. Each of these games did have proper interchange designs, from your traditional diamond interchange to cloverleaf and trumpet layouts. The city streets were also laid out very well, meaning you could vary your routes from district to district and never feel like you were getting lost. Honestly, all of the black box games, including Need for Speed Undercover, are deserving of remasters just for the sake of bringing the cities of Rockport, Palmont, and Tri-City Bay back into the racer zeitgeist. Unfortunately, I doubt we will ever get them. Moving on, you do have the Criterion and Ghost eras of Need for Speed. This is Hot Pursuit 2010, Most Wanted 2012, and Rivals, then 2015, Payback, Heat, and now Unbound. We would say that Criterion and Ghost had something going at the start, but that something quickly got muddled. The first 3 games on this list all essentially did away with districting and instead moved completely to street names. In doing so, every street name had a corresponding highway shield to it. Every single one. On the one hand, we really like this approach. On the other, it is a little bit overkill. That said, when the next 4 games came out, Ghost Games did away with this approach entirely and went back to using district names on signage. But more perplexingly, they coded certain highways as interstates, even though those interstates were not to code. There are sections of interstates with at-grade intersections. This is not to code. There are sections of interstates with speed limits of 30 miles per hour. This is also very much not to code. Even though the aesthetic is still there, it is almost deceptive in its implementation. And you know what makes this even more perplexing? Ghost Games had assets for a Need for Speed game that would have taken place in the real-world Los Angeles. Don't believe us? Well, consider this. There are at least 2 cutscenes in Need for Speed Payback which hint at such a thing. The first one is during the Regera heist event. As the semi-truck exits the tunnel, there is an overhead sign for a connector to California State Route 110. The second one that we found is during the Golden Vehicles heist in the late game. Mac and Tyler throw the explosives out onto the freeway, and you see an overhead sign for 6th Street and Highway 110, the Harbor Freeway, which is indeed Highway 110 in Los Angeles. Considering that Fortune Valley is meant to be Las Vegas, which is in Nevada, it really doesn't make any sense to have references to Los Angeles in the game. It would make more sense to list Interstate 15 or a fictionalized equivalent, and to put Ventura Bay Freeway as the routing instead of Harbor Freeway. So why did they do it? Honestly, we have no idea. Nor is this even the first time Ghost Games has done this. Remember, Ghost Games worked with Criterion on Need for Speed Rivals. At the end of the racer story, there is a highway shield for Interstate 580 in California. This interstate begins at San Rafael, crosses into Oakland at Interstate 80, then splits off and heads southeast before connecting to Interstate 5 south of the city of Tracy. Considering that Sunset Tunnel is State Route 1 in the game, this does beg the question whether the hills, forests, and deserts to the east of Oakland were the real-world equivalent for that game. Though other highway signage corresponds to real-world highways deep in the Sierra Nevada. And again, All of this begs the question, why? And once again, we just don't know. So when it gets down to it, the bottom line really is that Rockstar made a real-world version of a US city and then proceeded to never do so again. EA has the ability to make real-world versions of US cities and simply chooses not to, and Ubisoft, well, Ubisoft and Ivory Tower are simply doing their own thing, and they just do not care about the rules as far as the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration is concerned. And we would be lying if we said this didn't piss us off, because being truthful, it kind of does. It is infuriating because developers have the means to create lifelike driving experiences for people who cannot always travel. While Madeline has been to cities up and down the West Coast, from Portland to Seattle, Sacramento to San Francisco, Los Angeles to Las Vegas, doing so costs time and money. So when you do it in real life, it is generally for important reasons, like to visit family, or to see specialized doctors, or to purchase items you can't get in your own town, meaning you might only go once every few years. Imagine having a piece of software that lets you visit those same locations any day of the week and costs literally $0 in gas money. That is the augmented reality future that all of us as racing gamers have wanted for the last 20 years or longer. There is no reason not to do this. On the one hand, we feel that Ubisoft and Ivory Tower took a lot of liberties with the Crew Motorfest, and the Maui expansion in particular, because the real-world Hawaii is very ecologically protected and has very few highways or freeways to speak of. Their job with this game was to turn a fictionalized Hawaii into a driver's paradise, and they certainly did that. But they also could have gone further. They could have properly labeled the interstates H1, H2, O1, H2, and H3. They could have then labeled the new interstate they created on Maui as H4. They could have used official highway names like Farrington Highway or the Kamehameha Highway. They could have added state highway shields according to that state's official guidelines. They could have gone all the way with this, but they didn't. And it's not fair. Anyway, that's it for this video. Thank you so much for watching, and we will see you next time.